Hey everybody, welcome to Crack-A-Pack Tuesday, number 35 on the Mana Leak. I'm John, as always, and it's time for some more Battle for Zendikar Crack-A-Packs. We've only got, maybe 6-7 weeks left of BFZ before we're going to start cracking open some Oath of the Gatewatch packs, but until then, we've got some Zendikar to go through. So we're going to open this pack, we're going to go through what's in it, and we're going to see what we would take, pack one, pick one, in a draft. Up first, we've got ourselves a Territorial Bailiff. 4 and a green for a 4/4. It's got the landfall +2/+2 trigger that most landfall creatures have. It's a fine card, but it's super filler. You don't want many of these. You don't necessarily want the first one. Just not a great card, and certainly not first pick. Next up, we've got Royal Mage's Trick. 3 and a blue for a Converge. Creatures your opponents control get -X/-O, where X is the number of cards or colors that you use to cast the spell, and you get to draw a card. This is actually good as a sideboard card against Swarm Surge, because of course if you're in a 2-color blue-black, blue-whatever deck, and you cast this for Converge of 2, you cancel out Swarm Surge. That can actually be a blowout if your opponent was attacking with a bunch of creatures that otherwise would die. Definitely don't ignore this card. But don't take it highly. Don't take this with the plan of, aha, I'm going to foil everybody. It's a very specific situation, so certainly not first pickable, very last pickable, in fact, but a cool little use there anyways. Next up, Dutiful Return. 3 and a black to return 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. Too expensive, not worth a card. It wasn't good enough in cons. It's not good enough here. Don't play this card, and don't first pick it. Angelic Gift, 1 and a white for enchant creature. That creature gets flying, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card. This is, interestingly, basically a better version of Stratus Walk. I had that explained to me, and it made me kind of think about this card a little bit more, because, of course, Stratus Walk was sort of playable. It still wasn't that great, and it was a function of the set that it was in. And I think this still is only sort of playable. You don't want to play this. You don't want to be happy playing it. But it's maybe a 23rd card, I guess, but nowhere near first pick. Next up, the hits keep coming. Lava Step Raider, a single red for a 1/2. You can pay 2 and a red to give it +2/+0. Kind of a big fire-breathing effect. Way too inefficient. 1 mana 1/2 is not something you want to touch, and you don't want to pump 3 mana into this for a minimal little tiny effect that can be negated by chump blocking. Just not a good card. Don't play Lava Step Raider ever. Next up, we've got Grave Birthing. Grave Birthing is a 2 and a black devoid, and it does everything. Target opponent exiles a card from their graveyard. Please note, all you have to do is have a valid target opponent, and if you're playing a game of Magic, you have that. They can have an empty graveyard, because you're targeting them. You're not targeting a card in their graveyard, so you can cast this at any time. You also get a Scion, and you also get to draw a card. This is a fine, totally okay card if you need kind of a 23rd card in your deck, or a way to get Scions and you somehow had no better way, or a way to hopefully get Ingest going if you have no other way of getting Ingest going. But those are some pretty bad scenarios. You don't want to aim for those. So don't first pick this card, but it's an okay playable. Next up, we have Brood Hunter Worm, 3 and a green for a 4/3. Nothing else printed on this card except a whole bunch of flavor text. This is about as vanilla as you can get. It doesn't really fit in any draft deck. You don't want to be playing these. You can, and I wouldn't look down on you for playing one of them, but you don't really want to. Sealed's a different story. These have a bit more of a place in Sealed, because of course you don't get to pick every card that you're going to play in Sealed, but in draft this is just way too weak. That 3 toughness is a bad thing. Spell Shrivel. I like Spell Shrivel. I will take Spell Shrivel way higher than I probably should. 2 and a blue for a counter spell, unless your opponent pays 4 colorless mana, which isn't terribly common for your opponent to have in this set, because a lot of things cost a lot of mana. Generally, you're going to get the spell that you want to counter with this spell. It's only really late game, where the board has stalled and you're on turn 15 somehow, that this card kind of dies down a bit. I'm pretty happy to have multiples of these, 2 of these, even 3 of these I might play in the right deck. I'd prefer not to first pick it, but it is an option, and I think it's the best option so far in this pack. Oh, but this gets a lot better. 2 and a black for a devoid. Complete disregard. Exile target creature with power 3 or less. That sounds pretty bad in an Eldrazi set where everything's big, but as I think we've all learned, everything is not big, and killing something with 3 power or less is pretty common and pretty good most of the time, especially for 3 mana at instant speed. I think most people know Complete Disregard is totally first pickable these days, so no surprise there. I'm pretty high on Complete Disregard. The, I think, final common is Ruin Processor, 7 colorless mana for a 7/8, and when it comes into play, you can process and gain 5 life. It's fine. It's not the processor you want to be hitting, but it can get you back into a game, and it certainly stabilizes the board very well. But you need to know that you're going to hit 7. You need to have a deck that's prepared to get there, and you really want to have gotten something better than this. A Breaker of Armies, a Bane of Belaged, a nice fancy rare or something. There's a lot better than this. I would never first pick this, and I wouldn't want to be the deck that really wants a Ruin Processor. Uncommons, we've got Transgress the Mind, 1 and a black for a devoid. Target player reveals his or her hand, and you get to exile a card that has CMC 3 or greater. That's going to hit a fair bit, but I don't tend to like this effect. Duress, Thoughtseize, etc. It's way better in Constructed than it is in Limited. If I saw something that I was terrified of my opponent playing that cost 3 or more, then I'd side this in, but I would never ever main deck a Transgress the Mind. I don't recommend doing it. I know a lot of people do it, and it's kind of hard to explain to people just why it's so bad, because of course a lot of people will look at it and say, hey, it's removal. I'm going to hit something in their hand and I'm going to get rid of it, and it's like removal. It's removal on something that wasn't even cast. It doesn't always work out that way. There's a lot of times that it doesn't work out that way. There's a lot of times where you hit something you wouldn't really be afraid of, or you hit a hand that has nothing that's a target. There's a lot of bad things that can happen if you main deck this. Don't first pick it, and I really don't recommend main decking it. The final uncommon is Coreblade Whirl, 1 and a white for a 2/2. It's a bear, but it's got Rally. Whenever it enters the battlefield or any other ally, everything on your board gets first strike. Somehow, this is one of the weaker ones. But it's still one of the really good ones. The uncommon ones are generally all pretty decent. This is not Double Strike, this is not Lifelink, this is not Menace, but First Strike is still pretty darn good. And I'm pretty happy to have Coreblade Whirl. I don't really want to first pick it, but in a weak pack I would consider it. Let's take a look at the rare. That's not the rare. I miscounted the uncommons. I was thinking Complete Disregard was an uncommon. It's that good. We've got a Ruination Guide, and let me tell you, Ruination Guide is a good uncommon. 2 and a blue for a devoid 3/2, and all of your other colorless creatures get +1/+0. Plus, it's got Ingest, just kind of snuck on in there in the middle of all that text. I love Ruination Guide. Ruination Guide is totally first pickable in my books because I love blue-red colorless in this format. It's one of my favorite decks. I actually did an F&M draft a couple weeks ago where I was Grixis, blue, red, black, and every single card in my deck except for a Cloud Manta was colorless. I had 2 Nettle Drones, I had 2 Herald of Kozilek, I had a Ruination Guide. It was a disgusting deck and easily 4-0'd the draft. Ruination Guide is just fantastic. It's hard to pass this card up. Now let's see the rare. We've got a Conduit of Ruin, 6 colorless mana for a 5/5. When you cast it, you can go and search your library for a colorless... Let me actually tilt this so I can read it. A colorless creature card with converted mana cost 7 or greater. Reveal it, shuffle your library and put it into your hand. And then, of course, the first colorless creature that you cast each turn costs 2 less. This is a pretty fun card as well for the colorless deck. Unfortunately, the colorless deck also really wants the Ruination Guide, so we're going to pass one of those too. But I think it's definitely a first pickable card, especially to go down that route, and especially because it does fit in any deck. It ideally wants to be in blue-red colorless, blue-black colorless, maybe black-red colorless, but it does technically fit in any deck, and is probably very first pickable. Do we get a land? We get a basic land and a token. So I think I'm looking at Conduit of Ruin, Complete Disregard, and Ruination Guide. And this is a bit of a tricky pick. I feel like the best card, hands down, is the Ruination Guide, just barely edging out the Complete Disregard. But if you take the Ruination Guide, you're sending a huge colorless signal to the person on your left with the Conduit of Ruin. So I can see two camps of thought here. I can see taking the complete disregard and letting two other people fight over colorless. I can see taking the Ruination Guide and just trying to, make sure that your person to your left doesn't get a whole bunch of other really good colorless cards. I do think Conduit of Ruin is out over the Ruination Guide just by a little bit. And I think ultimately, just because of my absolute love of blue-black, of blue-red, of blue in this set, I think I have to take the Ruination Guide just barely over the complete disregard, but I could certainly see taking the complete disregard. Definitely let me know what you would have taken out of that pack in the comments below. Would you have taken the disregard? Would you have taken the Conduit of Ruin over either of those? Or would you have taken the Ruination Guide or something else? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at The Mana Leak. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. And you can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/The Mana Leak. You've already found me here on YouTube. You've got the comment section down below. Please make use of that. As well, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all next time.